I've been living in a new country every month for the past 4 months, and this month was Durrës, Albania. Today, I'm getting into the things I enjoyed, the things I didn't, and what it means for the future of my travels. Let's get into it. Things I enjoyed. The people. First thing we're going to talk about today is the people. Now, normally I don't really talk about the people in any country because I don't want to stereotype or be way too broad. Here, it's a little bit different. I loved the people of Albania. Like, Albanians have to be some of the most friendly, hospitable, welcoming people I've ever met. I've had 3 or 4 different instances of seeing people help out others get onto the bus. I've seen instances of bus drivers allowing homeless people and people who can't afford it to ride the bus for free. And I've seen a few other instances where people have helped out people with mental or physical disabilities. And it was just a small example of just how hospitable people are, also not just towards tourists either, because sometimes you get a bit of a bias because of tourism, right? Another example too is we were in Tirana about 2 weeks ago or so. You can see the video on my channel, I'll link it up above. And we were in Tirana and we couldn't figure out how to get to the main bus terminal using the city bus, and it was like an hour and a half walk, and we kept asking bus drivers and like none of them spoke good enough English to know what we meant by bus terminal. And so they were struggling, and we stayed on one bus because we thought it might be the right one, and the bus driver sent a girl back who spoke English to come and ask us where we were going and like how to get there. And she gave us great directions, helped us get to our destination, thank God. And you know, there was just another example. I couldn't make this video without including that. I make one of these videos every single month if you haven't been here before, and I always give a bit of a review of the country, my thoughts as a tourist, what it's kind of like to live here for about a month. And normally just talking about the people is a little bit of a challenge, but this time like I kind of had to talk about the people. The history. The next thing I really liked was all the history here. There's tons of history. There's castles and there's old Roman architecture. There's just all of these different little aspects of history that are just dotted throughout the country, and you walk down the street and you can just discover the history very, very easily. And it's been something that's been quite enjoyable here in Albania, especially in places like Tirana. They've left up a lot of the old Soviet architecture and things like that, and they've put plaques and signs and whatnot to tell you what it is. Rather than tearing everything down, they educate and, you know, inform you about their history. And for free as well. Like, a lot of the historical monuments and all that kind of stuff, it's either free or extremely cheap to get into. It's not like the rest of Europe. One of the things that I really loved about Albania is it didn't really feel like the rest of Europe. You know, it's not part of the EU, it's not part of the Schengen. It doesn't have the same level of mix of people. Like, because of the Schengen and things like that, you just see a little bit more tourism, you see a little bit more of a mix of people, you see a lot of different languages and whatnot in any country you go to. Whereas in Albania, it's not quite like that. It's very, very different. They have mixes of culture like Greek and Turkish, like especially in regards to their food and their culture, but it doesn't feel like the rest of Europe. You feel like you're a little bit further away, maybe closer to somewhere like the Middle East. Quite a pleasant experience as a traveler. I've been in Europe for the last 3 months, and it's like I was kind of, you know, excited to go somewhere, you know, that didn't quite feel like the rest of Europe. And I wasn't sure if Albania would fit that bill when I came here, but it definitely is like tick that box easily. Just the right amount of English. There is not tons of English here. Like, there's enough that you can get by, but there's not so much that you have no issues, and I really, really enjoy that. I love figuring it out. When you go to, say, a restaurant or somewhere like that, 9 times out of 10, the waiter will speak enough English to be able to serve you. It's not much of an issue. But when you go and take a bus, or you go into a store or shop or something like that, you find a lot less English, and it just makes it a lot more fun. Like, in every one of these, you know, review style videos that I have done up until this point, I normally touch on the English. And in Germany and Croatia, it was a little too much English. But here, there's just enough that my life isn't ridiculously hard to do everyday tasks, but there's not so much that, you know, you feel like you're kind of at home or it's easy. Like, travel is supposed to be a little bit challenging, and here it's just challenging enough.
Cost of living.
And the final thing that I almost always touch on as well is cost of living. Here, the cost of living is insanely cheap. I always touch on cost of living in every one of these videos, and here, the cost of living was just beautiful. It was cost us about $20 Canadian per night, give or take a couple of dollars, and we could easily spend about $20 to $30 a day. We could probably actually spend less than $10 a day. We did not cook a single lunch at home because we could afford to go out for lunch every day and only spend, you know, $2 to $3 on lunch. And we often went out and hung out on the beach and, you know, had coffee or had a beer at night or something of the sort because it was just so affordable. Definitely the best I've experienced so far. Like, France was the most expensive, moved into Germany, it was a little bit cheaper, but not by much. By Croatia, that almost like halved in terms of cost of living. Here, it was just a slight step down from Croatia, but I did find here as well, and part of this maybe Duras, is there wasn't as much free things to do. Like, if we wanted to go anywhere, we had to hop on a bus, which costs money. Like, if you want to do a lot of activities, it does cost you something.
Dislikes.
So, on to the things that I didn't like. Now, it was a little challenging to come up with this list because everything that I didn't like had a but. There was a lot of little intricacies of things that I didn't like, but it wasn't the broader topic. So I'm going to start with the one that's most controversial or most divided in my head, at least.
The food.
The food here was very hit or miss. When you found good food, it was really, really, really good food. But if you didn't, it often just was quite disappointing, overpriced, something of the sort. The food here, Albanian food, true Albanian food, is fantastic. As I said in the things I enjoyed with cost of living, we did eat out every day and ate a lot of like fast food, like not your McDonald's or your Harvey's or anything like that. Oh, Harvey's is Canadian. Not your McDonald's or your Wendy's or whatever you have for fast food and wherever you're from, but like little kind of stands where we get things like bareks or donaires or hamburgers or something like that, and none of it was fantastic. Bareks are the exception, but even then you can only eat so many of them before you get a little tired of it. So the food was a little hit or miss, and it wasn't my favorite thing because you didn't always know what you were getting into. Part of this whole thing is if you have the money to spend on really nice meals and you're here for a 1-week vacation, food's fantastic. You're gonna enjoy it. But for me, a little bit trickier because I had to balance out good price with, you know, good food.
Getting around.
So another thing I didn't like that also is kind of has a bit of an asterisk to it is getting around. Getting around is cheap, but a little bit tricky. So taking a city bus only cost us about 40 lek. Trying to figure out how to get from one town to the next or to get around in general was quite tricky. Like, there was no posted bus schedules, or we could maybe find them online. Like, the one Airbnb we stayed in Berat had a bus schedule, so they got it from somewhere, but we just could not figure out the bus schedules for one. And then that led us to, like, in Berat, where we showed up and they're like, oh, the last bus is in 3 hours. And we're like, okay, I guess we're staying the night. Luckily, not too expensive, so it wasn't the end of the world to us. But that was a bit of a factor in not really loving the buses. And that's part of the fun of travel. That's my asterisk, is it's still enjoyable. And even though that's the fun of travel, it did hinder us at times as well, because we didn't want to go somewhere and necessarily have to pay for a hotel room or not sure how we could get back or whatever. Like, we had a few other places we were considering going, but like, we kind of scratched them off the list because we're like, we're not sure and we don't want to just keep paying for hotel nights. Which also kind of leads me into the next point.
Driving.
it's sort of similar to the just getting around in the buses, but the one difference is I was really game to rent a car until I got here. And the big thing is that, you know, one, renting a car here isn't too bad, but the gas is absolutely insane. Gas here is about $2.20 a liter Canadian. I'll put the conversion on. You definitely need insurance, and normally, like, I have an American Express card, and I got pretty much for the purpose of that if you purchase a rental car with an Amex card, you have insurance covered, and Amex was not accepted anywhere here except for Enterprise, which had the most expensive cards. It was like $60 a day Canadian plus the gas, so it would have cost us way too much money. And then on top of that, driving here looks to be insane. I sit on this balcony just about every day and watch somebody almost get into a car accident. People bob and weave, and there's no nice way to put it, they kind of drive like maniacs. And I'm sorry if you're Albanian, I'm not trying to insult you, but I've sat here for about a month and watched you guys kind of drive like maniacs. That was part of our challenge of getting around, but like the getting around versus the car thing specifically is I kind of had to address them in two separate ways.
Cities are too small.
Staying in any one town for a month is a little bit excessive. Albania is not a big country in terms of population, and so its cities are not that big. Nowhere is really all that great to stay for a month unless you plan on just relaxing on the beach in the middle of the summer, like in any one location. Now, Albania is a place you could stay for 3 months traveling around. Like, I think there's all kinds of different cool towns and that you can easily see. Tirana was big enough you could stay for a lot longer. You know, I'm sure there's some other cities where you can stay for longer than Durrës and be entertained. But if you're coming to Albania, I highly suggest going around. A few days here, a few days there, a few days here, a few days there. You could do it for a month. You'll have a great time with it, but just don't stay any one place for a month. That's my one piece of advice.
My future plans.
On to the last part that I always cover, what does it mean for the future of my travels? What in Albania is gonna teach me something for the future that's gonna change the way I travel? But we're going to Japan next. So how does Albania really affect what I'm gonna be doing in the future? And in all honesty, not a lot. I mean, Albania was great, but there wasn't anything that jumped out at me like in Croatia with the cost of living, where we completely changed our plans and said, hey, we gotta go to like Albania instead of Scotland because it's gonna be a lot cheaper and we're gonna have a lot more fun. I guess this video, it's about Albania, but a lot of the things I still have to talk about are about my trip as a whole to Europe for the last 4 months. In a few days, I'm going back to Canada, and I'll be doing a video there about what it's like being back in Canada. I'm only gonna be back for a couple of weeks, just have some things I gotta do there. But that's it for today, guys. Consider subscribing if you wanna see more of this content. I'm gonna be posting a little bit less often for the next couple of weeks as I'm in Canada, only one video a week. So hit the notification button if you wanna know when I post a video. It might be a little bit sporadic. If you got anything out of this video, consider giving me a like. I'd really appreciate it. But until next time, we'll see ya.